Hello everyone, welcome to HFY Beyond Terror. This channel is all about HFY and sci-fi stories, where humanity's underestimated and then proves...
The first time I saw the Hall of Rivers, I thought it was a joke at my expense. The chamber wasn't carved or built so much as coaxed, a cathedral grown from pale stone that looked liquid, polished into curves that never quite repeated. Water ran everywhere. Thin sheets over the walls, narrow channels in the floor, a cascade behind the dais that fell without sound. It smelled like rain on hot metal. "This is where they bind," Captain Imani murmured beside me, her voice low inside. My earpiece. "Try not to look like you're planning a jailbreak." "I'm not," I said. Imani snorted. "Leilai, you look like you're always planning a jailbreak." Fair. I adjusted the collar of the diplomatic coat they'd issued me, a fabric with too much memory, springing back into perfect lines no matter how I moved. The garment had the color of deep ocean and the weight of a promise. It was meant to signal respect. On my wrist, the translator band warmed, listening for meanings hiding between syllables. I tried not to fidget with it. Across the hall, the Lyran delegation waited like a cluster of stars at dawn. Tall bodies, long arms, luminous eyes that shifted hue with emotion. Their skin had a faint pearlescent sheen, the kind you see on shells. They wore braided sashes that glittered with tiny beads. Not jewelry, I'd been told records. Every bead was a name they'd carried, a bond they'd honored. I'd carried names too. Mine weren't visible. Ambassador of the Terran Union. Survivor of the Dara raid. The man who signed the ceasefire that ended a war nobody wanted to admit had started. The human who, by accident of timing and talent, became the face of our species in this sector. And today, apparently, the man who would be honored by an ancient custom called the choosing of names. Remember, Director Sana whispered from behind me. "This is not a marriage. It's a bond," I recited. "A companionary." Tie, symbolic, cultural, and political, Sana added. Everything was political. Even water. A line of attendants approached Lyran, but smaller, younger. One carried a shallow bowl of clear water. Another held a ribbon of something like sea silk. The third held a stone the size of my fist, smooth and black with faint veins, of silver running through it like lightning trapped in rock. "The Heartstone," Sana said under her breath. "The marker of consent." So consent at least had an official prop. That was something. The attendants halted before me. The one with the bowl lifted it, arms trembling slightly from the effort of ceremony. I leaned forward as instructed and dipped my fingers into the water. Cold, clean, almost sweet. The translator band hummed. A ripple moved across the bowl. Though my fingers were still, "You are seen," the band translated not words exactly, but a sensation of being acknowledged by something older than etiquette. The attendant with the ribbon offered it. I placed it around my wrist like a cuff. It tightened gently, adjusting to my pulse. The attendant with the stone held it out. I hesitated. Captain Imani cleared her throat in a warning that said, "Don't make this weird." I took the Heartstone. It was heavier than it looked, weight settling into my palm like a decision. For a moment, warmth seeped through my skin, not from the stone but from the awareness of every eye in the hall. I looked up. At the dais, High Current Lysavar waited. She wasn't their queen. Not exactly. The Lyrans didn't do thrones in the way humans did. They believed leadership was a current, something that flowed through the most capable body until it moved on. But if anyone in this room could be called the authority, it was her. Lysavar's sash was a river of beads, hundreds of names woven into an arc across her torso and down her side. Her eyes, a clear green shot with gold, regarded me without blinking. The translator band ticked, interpreting layers. Duty, reserve, caution, curiosity carefully contained. The ceremony began with songs, not sung, but breathed harmonies formed by dozens of throats shaping air. The water on the walls trembled in response, making the room feel alive. Then came the explanation I'd heard in committee meetings and cultural briefings, delivered again here for the benefit of witnesses. When a people survived on the edge of hunger and storm, bonds were survival. Names were promises. To carry. Another's name was to say, I will not let you be forgotten. I will stand with you when the water rises. For allies, the Lyrans offered a choice, a companionary bond to symbolize trust. The chosen would become a name-bearer, allowed access to places and truths usually reserved for kin. And this part always made human negotiators sit up straighter. The name-bearer could request one name to carry with them. One name. Not property, not ownership, not a claim, a promise. To request a name was a declaration of intention in front of the hall. To accept was equally public. I swallowed, feeling the weight of the heartstone. A line of candidates stepped forward. Lyrans of various ages, sashes bright but not heavy, eyes attentive. My briefing packet had included polite suggestions. A scholar whose expertise would smooth the path of scientific exchange. A junior diplomat who would foster ongoing rapport, a liaison trained in human comfort signals. All excellent, all safe, all expected. The hall quieted. The cascade. Behind the dais continued its silent fall, relentless as time. High Current Lysavar raised one hand. The water along the walls slowed, as if pausing to listen. Liliet Marin, she said, my name shaped with careful precision. You have stood at the boundary of fire and kept your hand open. You have spoken for your people without drowning ours. You are offered the choosing of names. The translator band relayed more than meaning. It conveyed the faint strain beneath her words. This was not a casual honor. This was risk. I stepped forward until I stood at the center channel in the floor, where water ran like a narrow river between us. It glimmered with soft light. A Lyran attendant spoke. You may choose any name willing among those presented. The candidate's eyes warmed, colors shifting, amber, blue, pale violet. Some were nervous, others serene. One smiled in a way that looked practiced. I looked at them. I truly did. Then my gaze went back to the dais to Lysavar. She sat very still, as if movement might betray something. Her fingers rested lightly on the arm of her seat, a gesture. That could be read as composure or restraint. The translator band whispered preparedness, and a sliver of loneliness tucked deep. It wasn't my imagination. I'd spent enough time in rooms where people hid fear behind professionalism. I recognized the shape of it. The war had made me fluent. The Lyrans had offered us trust in ritual form. The Terran Union, in response, had brought negotiators, contracts, clauses, signatures. We were good at building frameworks, less good at carrying names. I thought of the beads on Lysavar's sash, so many promises, so much weight. And I thought of the heartstone in my palm, heavy as responsibility. A strange calm settled over me. Not certainty, never that, but alignment, like a compass needle finally finding north. I lifted the heartstone so the hall could see it. I choose, I said. The translator band amplified the declaration, shaping it into Lyran concepts without losing my intent. Every eye sharpened. Candidates straightened. Sana's breath caught behind me. I choose High Current Lysavar. Silence struck the hall like a thrown blade. The water on the walls actually stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. A frozen shimmer. Mid-flow, as if the room itself had forgotten how to move. Captain Imani made a sound that might have been a cough, might have been a prayer. The candidates didn't look offended so much as stunned. Their eyes shifting rapidly through colors humans didn't have names for. On the dais, Lesavar's expression didn't change. Only her eyes did green to bright gold in a heartbeat. The translator band hummed urgently, catching the undercurrent: shock, disbelief, alarm, an instinctive, "This is not allowed," followed by a quick, fierce calculation. Because of course it wasn't simple. It was never simple. "Hi, Karen." Lesavar rose. She descended the steps with slow precision. The beads of her sash clicked softly, a sound like rain on glass. She stopped on the far side of the floor river, close enough that I could see the faint patterns in her skin, like tides recorded in flesh. Her voice was quiet. "You misunderstand." "I don't think I do," I said, and then because I was very aware of 100 witnesses and the possibility of accidentally committing an interstellar insult, added, "If I have, tell me, and I will withdraw." Her eyes searched my face as if I were a text with a hidden line. "Why?" she asked. The hall held its breath. "Because saying I'm attracted to you would have been the wrong kind of truth. Because saying this is a political statement would have been the right kind of truth with the wrong heart. So I said the thing that had been building in my chest since I'd learned what this ceremony meant. Because you are the one carrying the weight," I said. "You asked my people to trust yours. You opened your hall and your customs to strangers. And you stand here alone, holding all the names your current has demanded you carry." The translator band rendered it into Lyran. "You bear many currents. I would bear one with you." Lesavar's fingers tightened on the edge of her sash. "It is not fitting," she said, but the words felt like armor rather than conviction. "Hey, Karen does not accept." "A Karen doesn't accept because it's complicated," I said gently. "Because it creates questions. Because it creates vulnerability," she snapped, the gold in her eyes flaring. Then she steadied herself, as if the outburst had surprised her as much as anyone. My heart thudded. I lifted the heartstone slightly. "Then we can stop," I said. "I can choose someone else. I can play the expected game." I paused. "But if this ritual is about consent, about promises, about names, then the only honest choice I have is the one I made." The water in the floor channel flowed. Again, tentatively, Lesavar stared at the heartstone. "You understand," she said slowly, "that to carry my name is to carry the scrutiny of every river house, every rival current, every old grudge, and every future debt." "I've carried worse," I said. That was true, but it wasn't a boast. It was a confession. She exhaled, and in that breath I heard something human. Exhaustion. "Your people will call this manipulation," she said. "They will say you aim to bind me." "My people will call it reckless," I replied. "They'll say I'm letting emotion run the negotiation." "Are you?" The question landed like a stone in deep water. I thought of the candidates waiting. I thought of Sana's neatly stacked contingency plans. I thought of the Terran Union's endless insistence on being seen as rational, controlled, unromantic. Then I thought of Lesavar's eyes, flickering with an emotion she had no room to show. "Yes," I said. "And also no." That made her blink one sharp, involuntary motion. "I care about outcomes," I said. "I care about stability. I care about my people not getting shot out of the sky because someone misreads a treaty clause." I lifted the heartstone, letting the hall see the open line of my palm beneath it. "And I care about the person standing in front of me," I added. "Not the title." The translator band softened the last line into Lyran nuance. "I see your current, but I choose your soul." Lesavar's eyes shifted green, returning. Then a quieter gold threaded through it like sunlight under water. The hall murmured a low ripple of sound. I heard a few sharp click speeds being touched, names being counted. Lys-VAR extended her hand over the floor river. "Then offer," she said. My throat tightened. I stepped closer, careful not to cross the channel. Without invitation, another briefing note. I held out the Heartstone. In the sight of your rivers, I said, and mine I offered to carry the name Lysavar, not as claim, not as chain, as promise. The Heartstone warmed, pulsing faintly. Lysavar's fingers hovered over it. Her hand trembled, just slightly. The translator band caught the unspoken storm. If I accept, I admit I am not invulnerable. If I refuse, I admit I wanted to be chosen. She looked past me briefly to where my delegation stood. Sana had gone very still. Captain Imani's face was unreadable, but her stance square. Steady offered silent support. Lysavar looked back at me. Elliot Marin, she said, clear enough for every witness. If I accept, you must carry my name without drowning in it. I won't drown, I said. That was a promise I had no right to guarantee, but I meant it anyway. Lysavar placed her hand on the Heartstone. The stone flashed, a thin line of silver brightening like lightning. A vibration ran up my arm, not painful, but defining. The translator band chimed and then went quiet, as if language itself had stepped back. The water on the walls surged, flowing again in full voice as if the hall had exhaled. Lysavar's eyes went fully gold. A gasp swept the room. She withdrew her hand slowly, and the Heartstone's warmth settled into a steady pulse. 2 beats, not 1. The attendant spoke, voice thick with awe. The Karen accepts. The candidates bowed and stepped back, their expressions a mix of relief and fascination. High Karen Lysavar turned toward the dais, as if to resume the script, but she paused. Her shoulders rose, then fell, as if she were adjusting to a new gravity. Come, she said to me, quietly. I followed her up the steps. When we reached the top, she faced the hall. Witness, she declared. A name is carried. A current is shared. The Lyrans responded in unison, breath harmony filling the chamber. The beads on their sashes chimed softly as they bowed, a sound like rain welcoming a new river. Only after the formal response did Lysavar lean toward me, her voice barely audible. You have caused a storm, she murmured. I'm sorry, I whispered back. Her eyes flicked to mine. Do not be. I blinked. What? She looked out at the hall again, face composed, but in her voice I heard something almost amused. It has been a long time, she said, since anyone had the courage to choose the river instead of the shore. The ceremony continued, as ceremonies do, with odes and symbolic gestures. I repeated phrases in Lyran that tasted like salt and sunlight. I touched water and stone and ribbon. I bowed in the correct angles, but underneath it all, my pulse kept sinking to the Heartstones. Steady beat. When the last hymn ended and the hall began to empty, Sana finally approached with the careful stride of someone walking across thin ice. Ambassador Marin, she said, tone pitched to remain respectful in case Walls listened. This will complicate the ratification process. Everything complicates the ratification process, I said. Sana's jaw tightened. You understand the optics? I do, I replied. And I understand the purpose. She searched my face, perhaps for signs of madness. Finding none because madness looks a lot like conviction from the outside, she exhaled slowly. Captain Imani will update security protocols, Sana said. You will likely be targeted by factions on both sides. Congratulations. Thanks, I said. Sana hesitated, then added, quieter. This was manipulation if you were trying to bind her. It wasn't, I said firmly. And if she felt bound, she wouldn't have accepted. Sana studied me for another heartbeat. Then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. Very well. I will do what I can to keep our side from panicking. You're good at that, I said. Sana's mouth twitched. I am. She walked away, already composing damage control statements in her head. Captain Imani approached next, hands clasped behind her back. She didn't speak immediately. She looked at the retreating Lyrans, then at me. "You okay?" she asked at last, voice plain. I glanced down at the heartstone. The ribbon around my wrist had darkened slightly, as if absorbing a new hue. "Don't know yet," I admitted, "but it felt right." Imani's gaze softened. "You picked the hardest option in the room." "Yeah," I said. "It's kind of my brand." She huffed a laugh. "It's also why you're still alive." Across the now quiet hall, Lysavar stood alone for a moment, speaking with two elder Riverhouse members. Their eyes were stern. Their hands moved in sharp gestures, debate, reprimand, warning. Lysavar listened. Then she said something that made both elders still. One touched the beads on their sash. The other bowed stiffly. Lys-VAR turned away from them and walked toward me. As she drew near, the air seemed to shift subtle, like pressure changing before. "A storm breaks. You are not dismissed," she said, voice formal for the benefit of lingering attendants. Then softer, "But you may walk with me." I followed her out of the Hall of Rivers into a corridor. The walls shimmered with embedded shells that glowed faintly. The sound of water was quieter here, a private murmur. Only when we were alone did she stop. She looked at me, really. Looked like she hadn't been allowed to in public. "You surprised me," she said. "That was not my intention," I replied. "It should have been," she said, and the corner of her mouth lifted a small, startling smile. "You could have chosen a safe name. Someone trained for comfort. Someone who would not disturb the currents." "I'm good at disturbing currents," I said, then regretted the flippancy the second it left my mouth. But Lysavar's eyes warmed instead of cooling. "Yes," she said, "you are." She reached out, hesitated, then touched the ribbon around my wrist. Her fingers were cool, and the translator band hummed softly at the contact. "I have carried many names," she said quietly. "Most were given to me by duty." Her gaze flicked up to mine. "This one was given by choice." My chest tightened. "You had a choice," I said. "You still do." "If this becomes too much," she cut me off with a sharp shake of her head. "Do not offer me retreat as if I am fragile," she said, then softened. "Offer me honesty." I swallowed. "Okay." She studied me. "Why do humans always try to build bridges out of themselves?" I blinked. "Is that what we do?" She nodded once. "You stand between currents and let them crash against your bones until they learn to flow together." I laughed, surprised by the sting behind my eyes. "That sounds unhealthy." "It is," she said, matter of fact. "And yet, it works." She stepped closer, and I felt the Heartstone's pulse steady, as if approving. "My rivals will say you sought to claim me," she said. "My rivals will say I let you claim me," I replied. Her eyes flashed gold again, quick as sunlight. "And?" "What will you say?" she asked. I took a breath. The corridor smelled faintly of salt and stone. "I'll say," I said slowly, "that I saw someone carrying too much alone, and I chose to help carry it." Lysavar held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded one small motion, but it felt like a door unlocking. "Then we will teach them what it means," she said, voice low, "to carry a name without turning it into a chain." My translator band offered the closest Terran equivalent, a bond without ownership. HFY, I thought, without meaning to. Not because humans were better God, no, but because we were stubborn about one thing, even when it cost us. Choice. Not the kind that takes, the kind that stays. Lysavar lifted her hand, palm up. An invitation. I placed my hand above hers, careful not to touch without consent, and she closed her fingers lightly around mine. Not possession. Not performance. Just contact. "Come," she said again. "There is a council waiting to drown us in questions." I managed a weak grin. I'm fluent in questions. Her eyes warmed. Good, she said, because I intend to ask you some. We walked down the corridor together, the sound of water following like a promised dot behind us in the Hall of Rivers. The currents kept flowing unbothered by politics, unstoppable as time. But for the first time since I'd entered Lyran space, I didn't feel like I was standing alone at the boundary. Felt the pulse of a shared name, and for all the storms it would bring, for all the scrutiny and danger and inevitable misunderstandings, I knew one thing with a clarity I rarely allowed myself. Some choices were worth the cost.